All right. Welcome to Waking the Kraken. I'm Wes Potts.
And I'm Alex Keeneman.
And today we're going to be doing not only our media show, but it's also going to be crossed over with our captain's logs that we used to do.
Yeah, we haven't done one in a while, so we figured we'd go ahead and do one.
Yeah, it's been months. And today we're going to be discussing our top 3 YouTube channels that we like.
Yeah.
So...
What's your first one right now?
My first one that I'm going to say is I've been watching these guys a lot. I know that anyone that watches like ThoughCraft, if they've watched a lot of Kaylee's old stuff, might like this too because she did all the Wendigo things and everything. Yeah. I've been watching a channel called Bedtime Stories. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I like about Bedtime Stories is it's one guy who produces... he writes all the scripts. Like, he writes an entire script. It's just him talking. But it's about weird occurrences. Like, basically, like, the Rathaus in Germany, which is, like, this, like, Nazi occultist kind of style. Mm-hmm. Or, like, he talks about, like, alien abduction cases or other things like that. Yeah. And the thing that I think is really interesting about it is it's set up to give you all the information that you need. But the artwork in it is, I think, the thing that really makes me excited about it. Okay. Is the story is incredibly gripping and really well written, but the artwork is a lot like it's done by an artist who does a lot of things that look like courtroom drawings. Okay, they're all in black and white except for the newest episode that I saw, which is the Skinwalker Ranch. Oh yeah. But they're all in black and white, and they're in that like kind of like really quick, rough sketched kind of, but like still very intricately detailed styles. And it just kind of changes with it and like zooms in. And sometimes he'll do a little bit of effect with like if a light flickers and stuff, you'll see that kind of happen. It just keeps you incredibly gripped. And I think it's for people that like horror stories or like kind of weird paranormal things. Seeing how I did What's Haunting Wes and Nate for a while, like that seemed to be kind of right down my alley.
Right on. Yeah. Well, for the channel that I'm going to talk about first is called WtK, and the guy's name that runs it is actually named Vati. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly what country he's from, but basically, like, his entire channel kind of revolves around the lore and like news events and like basically all the little pieces of media that he can get a hold of that are associated with From Software video games. So that would be all of the Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Bloodborne games, as well as the newest one, Sekiro. He also talks about some of their games from the past a lot, and one of their newest games they just released on PlayStation for PlayStation VR. He'll talk, I can't remember the name of it, but he talks about that one now. And what I really like about it is all of the Demon Souls and Dark Souls games and the Bloodborne, all of them follow the same type of formula where like there are cutscenes, but they're not telling you about the story. They're just kind of informing you in a particular moment about something that's like you need to know. But even then, like most people have no clue what those games are about. All of the story is like put together in pieces to where like every item has like a long text description, and you use the information from the items that you'll encounter in the world, and you have to use what they're talking about to kind of figure out like, okay, so I know that this item is from this place in the world, and they might even say like it was used by old hunters long ago of the Healing Church. Okay. And so then you know, okay, so this is like an ancient tool from whenever the Healing Church in Bloodborne was a thing in the past in the game's lore. And like, even though none of the like Healing Church hunters are really still around except for a couple, like it helps you kind of understand the history of what happened, because you already know, okay, well, this used to be a really big organization, but now it's kind of collapsed, and so it like opens the door to you being able to know, okay, well, something really crazy happened to these people.
Oh, okay, so it just gives a lot of backstory behind like the actual video games that you already love.
Exactly. And so what Vati ends up doing is he'll go through and read all of these item descriptions, and then he'll show you in game the places that they're referring to, and then he'll show you all of the artwork related to it and all of the imagery that you can find on like particular items in any of the games, and he'll kind of like connect the dots for you and like tell you about the story. And he even does a whole series called Prepare to Cry, where he's just like explaining the history and the lore of like the Dark Souls games, because it is so vague. And why I think this is important and really cool is pardon me, the creator of all of these games, basically he said that he wanted it to he got his like storytelling ideas from not being able to speak English whenever he was younger and trying to learn how to do it. So he would read books in English to teach himself English, and he would just read the words that he could read, and when he got to a bunch of stuff that he didn't understand, he would just fill in the gaps himself in the story in his mind.
Okay.
And so all of his games are kind of built that way, where you get little chunks of a story and you're allowed to kind of let your imagination fill in the gaps and like connect all the little chunks.
Interesting.
And Vati has a really nice voice that's really pleasant to listen to, and he does it in a really interesting way. And even if you don't like those games, it's just cool to learn about, and he makes it just feel like he's just talking about some mythos, you know?
Yeah. My second one that I'm going to do is the Templin Institute. And I showed you a couple of videos from them a couple of weeks ago. But the Templin Institute it's this weird sci-fi style channel where like everything is set up as if you have a tablet that is just basically a library.
Right.
And so you go, basically the whole focus on it is every world or fandom that you have is a separate and alternate dimension. Mm-hmm. And so it just gives you rundowns of if you find yourself in these alternate dimensions, what to expect from these knowledges. So like Warhammer 40K is a big one that they've been doing a lot of.
Okay.
I have really liked it for all of the Fallout stuff.
Yeah.
Because like it'll give you like a big breakdown. It's like Caesar's Legion. What to expect from Caesar's Legion? What's the history of Caesar's Legion? Who is Caesar? What are some other like big defining factors of Caesar's Legion? And it's all presented as if it's an educational video just in case you fall into that world. It almost feels like the Templin Institute itself is a training ground for people to go into other alternate dimensions, and basically it takes the idea of being a video game character, but you're still just the player. Like you get to inhabit this body and then go throughout it. So it teaches you how to kind of survive in this world by having previous knowledge.
That's really cool.
So I honestly I've never played Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, neither have I.
But I have learned so much about Warhammer just by watching these videos mindlessly. It's great. Like Holy Terra, it's got a bunch of different things. They started doing like creatures. So they had like this like the sandworms and stuff from Dune, which was really interesting to learn that history of. Basically, if you're a giant sci-fi nerd, or if you like video games, or if you just want to learn about just weird folklores that you'll never have time to go through the entire catalog of things, you can just learn it from there. Because the ones on Star Trek especially have been great.
I didn't even know they did one.
Yeah,
on
they
Star
did
Trek.
some on like the Federation. They did some on the Romulan Confederacy.
That's
like
cool.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna have to check some of those out.
Yeah.
For my next one, I'm going to talk about Nerd Writer 1. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Nerd Writer, essentially what he does is he breaks down films and books and like what people do well in the films and like or like what a certain director does well, and he'll make like a whole video on like how. Or one of his more recent ones is he did a whole video on what magic sounds like, and he talks about the sounds that they used for all of the magic in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And how that evolves from film to film as you basically hear the sound of magic kind of become set in stone and kind of defined, and how each director kind of changes their take on it and kind of updates what's going on, which is really cool. Like he basically gives you insight into films that you like would only get if you had binged them all in a row and like we're consciously thinking about that particular topic. And he really has like opened doors for me to mentally, like whenever I'm watching a film, to be like, okay, well, this is interesting. What are they doing here that's like kind of a unique thing? Because you wouldn't think about like, oh yeah, I wonder what magic would sound like.
Yeah.
You're just thinking about what could I do with magic?
His one that he did on what is it? The guy Fisher who directed Mindhunter and like Fight Club and everything like that. That video right there alone I show that to everyone.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, oh, you need to watch this video. It's great. Plus, he also tries to shoot the same way as the directors a lot of times in the videos, and he'll show you just how hard it is because he'll show you cut after cut after cut of him failing at it.
Yeah. I don't know. He basically is just like cracking open the heads of directors and like cinematographers and screenwriters and sound designers and pretty much anything associated with film, and showing you like all of the challenges that you wouldn't normally expect, and like kind of all of the little bits of like really artful things that they do that like are kind of easy to overlook whenever you're not in the world, you know. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah. My last one that I'm going to do is going to be Crash Course. If they're a channel that has 1,000 different stratifications of different things. They got Crash Course History, which if you haven't ever watched any of those, are 10 minutes each. If you need to learn about a history subject just to kind of understand it a little bit, they're phenomenal. Then they have Crash Course Philosophy, Crash Course Mythology, everything like that. But it's all located in one channel. Yeah. And they're very good at presenting a highly educational field with cartoons that are easy to digest and everything.
Definitely.
I love them, especially for history and the mythology. I think mythology especially gives like this great idea of sometimes we don't understand things because like it's obviously like it's a weird name, it's hard to keep track of, and so like having that cartoon image and not just like a picture of a stone carving or something like that is phenomenal to see how it works better.
Right.
Crash Course has been around for years. I think they like the founders of Crash Course actually were some of the founders also of VidCom.
Okay.
Or Con, and like yeah, those guys, they do great. Like I guess they started off by just like one guy's like history teacher from high school wrote all these scripts, and then they just made these things, and it just kind of went from there. They're incredibly enjoyable. They still keep posting things all the time.
And don't they even have some like YouTube Premium stuff that they're doing now as well?
I'm not actually sure on that because I don't have YouTube Premium.
Well, I think the last time I was on their page, I noticed that they had like a whole like, they had a whole series of videos that were like, oh, by the way, if you want like longer, more TV style versions of this, you can become part of YouTube Premium or YouTube Red, and get access to them. Which I think like,
and I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, and to me, like that just shows you like the quality of a YouTube channel. That the fact that like that they're still putting out all of this great free content, but then they're also like well liked enough by YouTube themselves to be like, all right, we're gonna like help you do a really high production value thing on here.
Right.
Yeah, and I really like that channel a lot.
And what's your third one?
My third one is gonna be Holistic Songwriting. This guy, I can't even remember his name, but he basically just will talk about like how Linkin Park writes a song, or how Taylor Swift writes a melody, or how anybody does anything in music. But he breaks down like usually popular music and just talks about like, okay, now what do these guys do when they approach songwriting, and like where does their kind of signature sound actually come from?
Interesting.
And one of the most interesting things he'll talk about is how like when Taylor Swift writes a melody, like she does what's called the one note melody, which is where you sing a bunch of syllables or different words on the exact same pitch, and you only vary slightly. And the reason that she does that is because she is trying to appeal to a pop audience.
Right.
And the less movement you have in a melody, the easier it is to sing and remember. And so, like, that makes it a lot easier for people who aren't singers to have the melody stuck in their head, and then for them to actually be able to say, okay, I know how to repeat that.
Yeah.
Because
isn't that what they say that Post Malone also does?
Yeah. Yes. In fact, if you look at the one note melody and think about that through almost all pop music, anything that you're going to hear on like your like Billboard Top 100 radio station, 90% of the time, if they're not rapping, they're pulling off some sort of one note melody.
Okay.
Even Linkin Park, like in that video, he talks about how like a lot of what they do is one note melodies that only will go up to the note above or down to the note below. Like I've become so numb, I can hear you say. Like
when you sing like a robot, it makes more sense.
Yeah, so he's just sitting there in that little range. So and what I don't know, it makes it a little bit more pervasive and a lot easier to kind of get into, because it is really hard to sing a lot of big leaps. And in fact, singers who want to take melodies beyond even just a single octave in range from the lowest note to the highest note will find themselves in a position where like people don't remember how to do it or how to sing it.
Yeah,
and I mean, good example, the United States national anthem. It expands like over an octave and a half in range, which makes it incredibly difficult to sing for most people.
That's why I always have pop singers sing it at big events.
Exactly.
Like Christina Aguilera or something.
Right, yeah. And I don't know. I guess one of the other things he does too is like he'll have some of his subscribers send in music that they're working on, and he'll do a whole video where he'll just be like, "Here's some suggestions for what you're doing."
Right.
And he'll show their music a little bit, and then say like, "All right, this is cool, but maybe you should try this as well." And like that's just kind of like one, giving attention to some unknown songwriters, but also he's teaching and helping them learn and how to make music in different ways and in better ways, and I think that's really important.
So since this is a captain's log,
Yes,
do you have an honorable mention?
I do have an honorable mention.
What's your honorable mention?
My honorable mention is Polygon. It's basically a channel kind of like the Crash Course, where they've got a bunch of different kind of series that are hosted by different people, all on the same channel. And they mainly talk about video games but they just come at it from all sorts of different perspectives. So, sometimes they'll do things on like TV shows and whatnot, but they mainly focus on like why BioShock isn't a scary game, or at what point does it stop becoming scary? Or they'll do something like, let's rank all of the hats in Red Dead Redemption, or like let's...
Oh, you told me about that one the other day, actually.
Yeah. There's another really interesting one where he basically takes all of the robots from Mega Man, because there's lots of them, and he just says like, okay, let's discuss whether or not this should have been made into a robot with AI. And there's like 700 robots in that game, over 700, so he like has to pare it down to like the 150 that he thinks are not going to be just like murder machines, because he just says anything that's a murder machine just doesn't count.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just like fun and entertaining, and it's like not really got any real point other than to be entertainment. And I really enjoy watching that show, because they're not like really up their butt about like, well, this is what this video game should be, and here's what they did wrong. They're just like saying like, here's an interesting thing. Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And I find that really enjoyable. Yeah.
Mine is probably going to be... Let's see. Honorable mention is tied between two right now. But I'm going to pick Vox. Like, if you've listened to Vox, like anything like that, they do a gambit between, like... They've got all kinds of different videos. Some of them are more musically driven. I think they are one of the few ones that seem to be the most television styled on YouTube. Definitely. From what I've seen. Like, they've got musical ones, they've got news report kind of things and stuff. Like, they're everything that I wish I wasn't a channel if I had a lot more money and people to work under me that I could actually like stratify this. Exactly. But I just watched one the other day that was on, I think it was on Miles Davis, and it was on like no, it wasn't Miles Davis, it was Jonathan Coltrane.
Yeah.
And it was his like kind of workings of how he did a particular, I think it's Giant Steps.
Yes.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's known as being like one of the most difficult songs in jazz.
Yeah, and I think the thing that made it interesting, though, to me personally, is I know nothing of music theory. I come to every question about music theory with you. But the thing is, I think the thing that was interesting about it was it didn't make me feel stupid.
Right.
Like, they introduced it and gave so many other examples to where I felt like I understood this concept of how like different keys change, and then also how mixing things around can like give this kind of weird foreign kind of feel to things sometimes. He basically took a wheel and like he put all the different like keys that you could do it, and he said the easiest thing for me to understand how keys work is to think of them as languages,
right?
Which was great for me, because it's like, here's Spanish and here's Portuguese. They're very close, so they're easy to change to each other.
Right.
But here's Spanish, here's Japanese. A little bit harder to do. Sounds really cool if you can, but like It's a lot harder. And I thought that in itself, that example of using that abstract kind of notion was very cool.
Definitely.
And Vox has been really great on producing a lot of things. I will say they do have a very like liberal lean to them, so if you're one of those people that's just here for the entertainment and don't want to watch anything like with a bunch of liberal lean to it, I wouldn't watch that channel.
That's fine.
But I will say that as someone who appreciates that, I do really enjoy that.
Yeah, I've definitely watched a lot of Vox.
Yeah, Vox is great, so that's my honorable mention.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that's some of our favorite YouTube channels right now.
Yeah, have a good one, guys.
Bye. Okay, goodbye.